Good morning, Bitcoin. My name is Thomas Hunt, and this is Proof of Work, a show about the people behind Bitcoin and how they got here. We're joined by Nicholas Gregory from Commerce Block. How's it going, Nicholas?
Very good.
Thanks for being on the show. How's Manchester treating you so far?
It's actually the first time I've ever been here, so I'm a typical Londoner. Never really leave London. Normally go to the airport. I've been to Southampton once.
It's so funny. We're only maybe 4 hours away from London, but people have never been here. It's I always think of the UK as such a small island, and I'd be like, oh, I'd drive around, I'd go there. And it's like, no, you never visit Arizona, and you never visit Manchester. So, well, that's very cool that you're getting out and seeing some new stuff. So we want to go ahead and get started with everyone's most favorite and familiar question. What was your first computer?
It was the Commodore 64.
Oh, I've heard that a lot. And what did you do with it? Did you play games or typing? Or
I think I did basic. I remember I played a couple of games. The one I remember was Way of the Exploding Fist, which was like a martial art game. Then I used to do like very basic. I think the language was called basic, like
Sure.
10 do something, 20 do something, 30 do something.
Oh, yeah.
I think I got up to maybe 120 or something.
Well, yeah, you had to use tens in the line number, so in case you had to go back and add an extra line, it would be like 11, 12.
Yeah.
But if you needed to add more than 9 lines, you're SOL. You had to redo all the little side numbers. It was very frustrating programming language.
And the favourite keyword was go to, because you'd get into those little endless loops and your screen would go mess up. And that was what I remember.
It's when I first learned of syntax errors. And I was like, what the heck is syntax? I didn't pay that. So that's very cool. You had a Commodore 64 and you were learning some programming and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you go from there? Did you continue with computers or did you go away from them for a while?
I always dabbled with them. I think maybe I had a break between the Commodore 64 and then I got the Atari ST.
Oh, yeah.
My dad was into music.
Yeah.
So I managed to use that as an excuse to buy an Atari ST because a lot of music people like that kind of stuff. So
I once tried to convince my parents that the Nintendo Entertainment System would be educational because I would get Donkey Kong Math and I would learn everything that way. And I don't even think I got the Donkey Kong Math cartridge, so that didn't work out either. But computers were a little more educational. You could do more than just play games with them.
Yeah.
So then how did you go from being into computers early to learning about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I did study computer science at university. And then I worked in Silicon Valley doing the whole .com stuff. And then I found myself ending up in the financial system. I had a background in grid computing and object databases and quite early on. And I think in the year 2005 to 2008, banks were starting to look at they were looking at very complex, large compute grids to basically price derivatives. So during that period, a lot of the banks reached out to people like me. I'd done some stuff. I worked for a company called Gemstone, which was quite well known in the object database space, grid computing space, and that's how I got into banking. So yeah, I'm an ex-banker, but I know nothing about banking, but there was some interesting, complex software stuff to do in those days.
Well, it takes people from all over getting into Bitcoin. We have libertarians, programmers, bankers, historians.
Yeah.
So as a banker, how did you become technically into Bitcoin? Because I know Dan's telling me all the time you wrote a BIP 175, you're a Bitcoin programmer, you're on the board. The rest of us are correcting spelling errors, and we're trying to contribute. But you actually gave a contribution. So how did you get from being a banker interested in Bitcoin into programming Bitcoin?
Well, I guess like a lot of maybe people working in banks in 2008 when banks went bankrupt and socialism took over banking, didn't really understand what was going on. And as I said to you, I built grid computing systems. We were supposedly pricing derivatives, but we could have been pricing bananas for all I knew.
Sure.
And I think 2008 opened up a lot of people to what was going on to economics. We were like, well, this ain't kind of right. Businesses go bust, you go bust. And socialism and communism, kind of took over. And I think there was a lot of confusion. And I think through that, I started, I was a fan of Zero Hedge. I don't know if that's good or bad. A lot of people like the film.
He's mixed,
I was always a fan of Fight Club. And
Sure.
I think Fight Club, Zero Hedge kind of leads you into a certain path towards Bitcoin. And I'm British, obviously, but I moved to the US around 2010. And I was New York specifically, and I was really lucky that New York had quite a good Bitcoin scene.
Sure.
So I knew about Bitcoin around 2010. When I say I knew about it, I'd seen it a few times on a website called Slashdot.
Yeah, that's where I saw it too. And
which was basically the website for anyone who was into Unix programming.
Yeah.
And I never really, to be honest, never really looked at it. And around 2012, a friend of mine that I was working out, I was doing a bit of martial arts, told me about mining it. And it just so happened that when I looked for it afterwards, the Java version had been released. Because I'd been doing Java for the last couple of years. And to be honest, if there was only the C++ client, I wouldn't have bothered because I was fed up with doing C++.
Sure.
So the Bitcoin J version came out, and I kind of just got interested in it. I didn't really necessarily believe it at first because of the whole 10-minute block time, and that the penny took a while to like drop. But then through going to meetups, there's some really good meetups in New York. There's a BitDevs at NYC. The guys who run that became very good friends of mine. And then I wanted to contribute. I ended up leaving Bitcoin and going to Dash. Mainly, and this is going to sound weird, but in 2013, it looked like Bitcoin was finished, and there wasn't much to do. And, other projects were coming up where I felt I could contribute. And then, fun enough, people at the meetup said, these coins are a bit dodgy. So I ended up with some of the guys I met at meetups looking at ways to use Bitcoin. Again, I always saw, even around 2013, 2014, I saw Bitcoin as completed. I started looking at ways to put things on top. So I spent a lot of time on colored coins. And also Counterparty I played with. And because of, New York was interesting because it had a very oppressive bit license. Anyone who wanted to do anything in the startup scene couldn't. But it created a thriving OTC market. And there was a lot of opportunities to write, boutique OTC software. So Bit 175, there wasn't really much to it. There was a paper called Pay to Contracts, written by, I forgot his name.
Uni Gerhardt.
Those guys. And that was a way to kind of like add metadata to a Bitcoin transaction by kind of like you're generating a new address with some metadata. And me and my friends, we felt if we kind of wrote an implementation of that, we could basically reduce the escrow costs of OTC transactions, which was quite a big thing for the kind of the work we were working around. And it kind of just grew from there. It was a way to do Bitcoin. I never really wanted to do, the low-level Bitcoin, to be a Bitcoin core contributor is it's not easy.
No,
and, it's not like you can write new stuff. You've got to get into C++, and you've got to understand cryptography. So
and so much of it, they're trying to protect Bitcoin.
Yeah.
If you bring in a new idea, you have to really heavily vet it. You have to vet the possible consequences and all the butterflies. Whereas if you just say, no new ideas, you're relatively secure, you're relatively safe. And they have a lot of that, I think, built up, not negativity, but protectionism. They have a very secure thing, and they're going to keep it secure by being very careful about what they add.
Also, New York, there are some good Bitcoin core devs there as well, so I was able to leverage a lot of their knowledge and help out. I won't say who they were because I'm not going to use them to promote what I do now.
Sure, it's fine.
But, people know, And
people are very generous in this space. They'll contribute even, maybe they think your project's stupid, but they'll come look at it and they'll tell you it's stupid. And they'll tell you why they think it's stupid. And you can try to fix it, or you can just ignore them. There's lots of commentary.
My experience is that I was a very supportive community, and I'd say around 2016, a lot of my closest friends in New York were right or wrong from the Bitcoin meetups and stuff.
There you go.
But it became like that. And then when I moved to London in 2017, I decided to come home. I come to a Bitcoin meetup. I think I went to CoinScrum, met Dan Eve, met Nindy, and before I knew it, a lot of my closest friends in London were Bitcoiners. I don't know if it's a sad thing, but I don't know if it's a bad thing, but...
I have the same thing where now I can be like, oh, I have friends all over the world. And then if you take a step back, I'm like, I have Bitcoin friends all over the world. It's good.
It's sad. I don't know. No, I think it's actually a good thing about the community now. Like, I think when Dan went to New York, I introduced him to some of my New York friends. He went out drinking with them. I won't say, a lot of the guys that I know in New York don't like to be on social media, but Dan got to go rap with them in private.
That's it. Well, and it's really neat too. Bitcoiners are so generous. I've stayed on a lot of people's couches. I offer people to stay on my couch if they want to visit. Even friends of friends. You find a lot of trustworthy people in this who, libertarian or not, they have that attitude that I'm not going to mess with your stuff. I'm going to keep my stuff and your stuff and your stuff. And from that point, we have this foundation we can work together. So.
That's good. It's been a great journey. Even if, I think some of the Bitcoin core devs say Bitcoin's still alpha technology, which it is, but I think it's changed the world and it's created communities, and it's been a lot of fun.
So what are you working on right now in Bitcoin or related activities?
Yeah, so we still believe, like, I still am very much a Bitcoin. I don't like to use the word maximalist. I mean, I like playing around with other coins like Decred. The more cryptographically minded people I work with tend to spend a lot of time on Monero, but we essentially want to build layers on top of Bitcoin. So I still think there's use cases for Bitcoin, like pegging assets. Like if you wanted to build a precious metal coin, or if you want to represent real estate. And so we spend a lot of time on using sidechains, and we've taken the code base that Blockstream wrote, which is basically 99% Bitcoin, and we've forked it and we've mutated it in various ways. We call it Ocean. It's fully open source. And then we built this kind of like protocol to test it back onto Bitcoin. So it's a bit like open timestamps, but we do something a bit more. We kind of like peg it to Bitcoin permanently. So it's called Mainstay. It's a bit like I think Peter Todd wrote something called a sealed set years ago on a blog, and I guess we've kind of done a rough implementation of that.
Cool.
But it's open source. I think we're live at the moment. And that basically allows you to build a sidechain and then kind of like peg it to Bitcoin for like various attestation states.
So what could you do with the sidechain? What kind of applications would it be used for?
So the kind of people, I mean, we're driven by the clients that come. We've got people that want to build a precious metal coin or kind of put real estate.
Sure.
And it's not necessarily, I mean, sidechains means different things to different people. It's not like the traditional sidechain where you go from Bitcoin to a sidechain and that. We actually don't do that.
Yeah.
We actually have a separate asset, but we're using Bitcoin's proof of work to secure it. So I think one of the use cases you'll see in Bitcoin over time is probably going to be one of the world's best, timestamping services.
Sure.
Which, was it that quote from Benjamin Franklin, time is money is time. So
yeah.
Bitcoin, is money, but what's the most valuable thing in the world? Time. And if you can use the time states of Bitcoin to secure a sidechain, to secure legal documents, that may be an offshoot. And we've done it in a kind of innovative way where we're not actually polluting the blockchain. We use pay-to-contract, which is stuff we did in Bit 175, and we aggregate many states. So I think we build a Merkle tree that can have up to 100,000 entries.
Yeah.
So there's no risk that we're ever going to do any very block type stuff where we're going to be responsible for 25% of the transaction space. We write one transaction an hour, and we've got up to 100,000 slots. If we get 20 slots, we've done well. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. People don't know how important timestamping is. They think it's just like a notary with a stamp or something kind of old-fashioned. But I used to work with lawyers in the legal industry, and so many times the evidence for when this email was sent, when this document was last edited, these are all timestamps, and that's just, you have to trust that computer, and we do forensics and those kind of things. You generally can trust it. But if you had a secondary system confirming those independently of that computer, and I don't have to trust that computer anymore, I can really say, yeah, you wrote this document on the 7th. That was your idea. They stole your idea on the 14th.
Yep.
We can just track it all back, and that kind of evidence is so many more applications than you might just think with just a clock.
It's going to be huge. And I guess where open timestamps just kind of writes up various, we kind of maintain state. So if you had a document and you changed it, unless there's a kind of an entry for that change, it's kind of void.
Yeah.
Our service is still somewhat centralized, but you always have to trust somebody.
Sure.
And then we're quite open about it. And we think.
Well, and you wouldn't want to edit all the timestamps. I mean, that would destroy your business.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
It's not in your own interest. You'd prevent that. So.
Exactly. But we're seeing a lot of use cases. I mean, we've worked with a few clients, and the regulations have kind of slowed it down from being released. But we hope to have some announcements towards the end of the year or midsummer. And it's fun. I mean, a few of our guys, have made contributions back into Elements. I think we've tried to make contributions back into Bitcoin where we can. So we try and always push back any change we've made. And a lot of stuff is around KYC, so that doesn't really belong in Bitcoin.
Sure.
Things like we've spent a lot of time like on making the Bitcoin code base more operationally. So our DevOps guys basically, I think he submitted a Docker image back to Bitcoin Core, and one of our developers, Nicholas, he's submitted some ways of building a kind of like Elements Federation, and Blockstream guys kind of like took that back in as well. So we try, and everything. There's not much. The only things we do which are not open source is the work around HSMs, because they tend to have like proprietary hardware, which is proprietary software for obvious reasons.
Sure. Well, it's amazing how open source can allow people to contribute, and even when you're off in a company, you can still give back to the original project, and then that just benefits everyone else and some other little company, not necessarily competitors, but their Bitcoin experience is improved because of the work you guys have done or others.
Yeah, and a lot of, and funny, we don't have much competition in the industry from people from Bitcoin. It's normally the blockchain people. a nice, the kind of the Hyperledger R3 crowd. That's where we normally compete against.
Sure.
And as I said, I come from.
I hear they have their transactions down to an hour now. Ooh, an hour.
Well, the hard thing is, I come from a database background, so I look at Hyperledger and go, okay, maybe why aren't you using a database?
Yeah, I get in a lot of trouble for that with the blockchain thing, because I think a lot of that could be done in a database for cheaper, right?
I mean, the way
businesses cheaper.
Yeah.
Like
the way I try and think of blockchain, because blockchain is useful, but it's basically for peer-to-peer public transactions, whatever that is. I mean, Bitcoin is obviously trustless. If you're going to peg it to like some sort of other thing, then you're minimizing the trust essentially one person. The way I try and say it, if you look at a gold ETF, how many people do you have to trust between having like some sort of reference that says you have gold in an ETF all the way to the golden vault? I don't know, 20, 30?
Sure.
Whereas if you had a gold mining company or gold vault, which had a sidechain, there's only one person you have to trust. And if that same person owns the sidechain, you limit your layers of people who can manipulate the gold or whatever. And that's the way
I saw a great Jeffrey Tucker speech years ago where he was talking about gold, and he said, gold is great, except it's heavy and it takes up space. And because of those reasons, if you have a lot of it, then you have to pay someone to carry it around. Then you have to pay someone to secure it. Then that you have this gold vault following you around everywhere you go. And just what a nightmare it became, just thinking about that. And you think about people trying to get out of this country, go across the line to some other country, and they load their car up with gold. And it's very heavy, and it's very sagging and left and right. And they go through the thing, and the guy's like, hey, what you got in the back? 30 bars of gold. And pretty soon you don't have 30 bars of gold anymore. It belongs to the government now. Like your life savings, your family history, your ability to buy the Smithsonian Museum, gone. So yeah, it's a lot easier to carry a hardware wallet or a paper wallet or even a brain wallet. And then who knows how much money you have on you or value. So
yeah, it's interesting how that's going to play out in the future.
Yeah. It's a lot more fluidity, a lot less imaginary lines that we call borders, and it's going to be very, very hard to collect taxes, I think. I still, of course, pay mine voluntarily, and I suggest that everyone should. That's the right thing to do. I like roads. Some of the other services are good. But it's, contribute. But in the future, it's going to be voluntary contributions. It's going to be a different system if you can't use force to get the money back. So.
Yeah, what happens when people honestly forget their private keys or forget? I mean, I don't think many people have private keys in their head, but a lot of people may have a four-digit PIN for their ledger. I think that's probably going to be a bigger issue going forward.
I just saw a big article where a Wired writer was basically crying because he'd forgotten his PIN. And he'd done the calculations. He's like, how many pins can I guess per minute, per hour? And he was like, yeah, the rest of my life I could be guessing pins, and I'm not getting this $10,000 in Bitcoin back.
I think Ledger only lets you do it 3 times, and it
that would be the end of that. You better guess really good on the last try. But yeah, it's very much, we say all the time, Bitcoin is adult money. And that, you can't just have your credit card out there and spend it wherever you want and then call them up and cancel. There's no one to cancel. I remember I was separating my Bcash from the Bitcoin, and I have that thing on Windows. I'm good at installing programs, so I click next 100 times.
Yeah.
I don't really read the prompts. And by the time of the thing, I was like, where did I send that Bcash? Oh, shit. And I was like, it's gone. I have no recourse. I'm an idiot. And I went back through, and you had to go to like beta.trezor.com to get to the Bcash. So it was fine. It was all there. But there was that minute or two where I was like, I need to go a lot slower through these prompts next time. I need to be a lot more responsible because there's no one else to call. There's no 1-800 number. There's no help coming. So
I think there's still a lot of room for innovation on custodial solutions at the moment. I mean, one of my bugbears, a lot of these custodial solutions look like bank accounts.
Sure.
And they really should look more like LastPass, where you could be storing anything you want in LastPass, no one knows.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to say LastPass, that's not open source. Maybe Bitwarden, which is like an open source version of LastPass.
Sure.
You could just be storing anything you want. And a lot of these, I mean, I like Zappo and things like that. Yeah, great. But they're like banks. I log in, they know exactly how much money I've got.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think when some people start building like custodial solutions where it's just custody, and you pay depending on the level of custody, whether, it can survive a nuclear attack and stuff like that, but they don't actually know what money you have. That's when it's going to get interesting. I think as the market matures, I think you'll see decent products coming there.
I do think that's important to have that financial privacy. I even thought a while ago that it would be uncool to have lots of Bitcoin like in a wallet doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They'd want you to be investing that, to be putting it in the community, and that we could have this thing where you could say, hey, you're just sitting on 100 Bitcoin doing nothing. Why don't you start a company or start a community or something like that? We haven't quite gotten there. It's still very cool to have 100 Bitcoin, but maybe it would be cooler to have a really nice community and a really nice company and maybe a little investment, a little savings, and just spread it out more. So.
Yeah, and I think that will happen. I think innovation is going to come where it's needed. I think a lot. No one really needs. I mean, we went through that period in 2014, 2015, where I think Dell was saying we sell with Bitcoin, Expedia.
Yeah, yeah.
The issue is that I think most people that hold Bitcoin don't actually want to spend it. They rather spend their dollars or euros or pounds. You get rid of junk money. Because if you buy Bitcoin, you probably believe in it. So why would you want to spend it? So I think
that's fun sometimes. I have like a sticker that's worth 0.1. That's a really nice sticker. I put it on my car, and my car's worth less than 0.1 now. I'm probably going to trade that car in.
But you rather get rid of like your fiat.
So,
I mean, so long as you can live.
As long as you can also rebuy. A lot of people, if you just rebuy the Bitcoin, you spend $60 on drinks, you rebuy it. It takes a little bit of responsibility and being an adult.
Dan Eves got like a $20,000 laptop. You don't want to be the guy that buys the pizza for $10,000.
Probably a really good laptop, and those were probably really good pizzas, although they were Papa John's corporate pizzas.
Gold-plated,
the best.
Yeah. Gold-plated laptop is.
It could be pretty good. I got my laptop with Bcash, so that worked out. So, yeah.
So that's a cheap laptop then,
yeah.
Free it's
to
dropping
me.
every time.
Yeah.
It's depreciating pretty fast, isn't
and again, they were all mad at first they were mad at me. They're like, you sold too early, you could have gotten 3 laptops. And now they're like, you sold all right, you could have gotten half a laptop. And it's like, that's all right. Half a laptop is just so not useful.